is Nathan. You can call me Pastor Nathan. Nathan, whatever's meaningful to you, I'm so thankful you would be here today. Today, we celebrate a resurrection. That story is tough to get your head around some days. I was with a friend who has been kind of exploring this Jesus thing, and I was trying to kind of gauge where they were. And so I asked them, hey, in a couple weeks, we're going to be celebrating that there was a man, Jesus Christ, who died and came alive. What do you think about that? And they responded, that is a wild story. And you know, I kind of wanted to get a little bit like affirmation for myself that they actually believed it, right? So I was tempted to kind of be like, but really, is that okay with you? Do you get it? Does it make sense? And I didn't say that. I think I just kind of kept quiet, but like most people, I laid in my bed that night and I replayed all my social interactions from the day, and I was just so nervous, and I realized that when someone hears the story of a Jesus who died and rose again, there's no way I can explain it. There's no way I can prove it. There's no way I can convince you of it. It just is. It's just true. I don't think convincing or explaining it is actually as helpful as we might think it is. And a couple weeks later, I was talking with Jeff, one of our other pastors, and he came up with this word that kind of encapsulates how to respond to this mystery that one who was dead is now alive. He said this word, the word somehow. Somehow, right? A man who is dead is now alive somehow. Somehow allows for mystery. Somehow allows for the unexplainable. Somehow allows for even maybe faith. Even hope. Tomorrow, you might go into your office, and if you were to say the words, Christ is risen, people would be like, what's going on? So maybe don't do that. You might be disappointed. Maybe there's a guy who's more Christian in the office than you. Let him play that game and let him get let down. But somehow you can't explain it. We believe it, but it's difficult because if you can't explain it, then you can't control the story. It feels almost uncomfortable. I think that's when the allegations that what we believe becomes some kind of weakness or a crutch, or it shows that, well, really this religion stuff we use is just like an opiate for the masses. It's just to make us feel good. But no, somehow, Jesus is risen. It's more comfortable when you can explain things. I wish I had more control over the story. It's comfortable when you can explain things because like a doctor who uses their expertise, they diagnose and they give you medicine, right? There's a comfort in that. Finally, a doctor diagnosed me and told me what was wrong. If you have children, maybe you have a theory of parenting, right? And supposedly that theory of parenting is going to make your kids not a train wreck. That's at least the hope or the presupposition. At work, it's helpful when you're in control, where you work hard, you hit certain metrics, you get the financial goals that you have set for yourself, right? You control, I can explain an outcome. Religion, we know, sometimes tries to offer certainty beyond what we can actually offer. Maybe you've been a part of a church community that gives you step-by-step ways of living to then finally you'll be blessed, whatever that means. No, certainty is actually really comfortable. If things are logical and you can explain them, it feels like we're a bit more in control. But we're not. You can't explain it. The doctor who diagnoses the illness gives you the medicine, and you still suffer. You are the best parent you could be. You could possibly muster up all the courage and the strength to do, and your kids still struggle. You worked hard, you hit 65, you retire, and you're unhappy. You were the good Christian. You read the Bible, you followed the rules, and somehow God feels silent, maybe even absent. There's questions we have in our lives that are unresolved. We don't have good answers. We can't explain them. We can't explain why life goes the way it does. And then there were those women in the reading, and they were headed to the tomb, and they had questions surrounding the last couple days of Jesus' life. Sometimes when you ask that question, like, why do bad things happen to good people? I was thinking about that question. It's the only time that it's appropriate to really ask, right? Jesus, the one who is sinless, perfect, fulfilled the law, a bad thing happened to him. He died. And they had to have wondered, why was he treated like a criminal? Why did he leave us? Why did he die at all? And they have all these difficult questions that don't have explanations, that don't have reason or logic or even a very good answer. And as they get closer to the tomb, they start to ask more practical questions. They were bringing spices to prepare Jesus' body because the Sabbath had kind of caused them to not be able to get to see Jesus after his death. But as they're getting to the tomb, they realize, who's going to roll away the stone? Jesus is dead, but he's sealed inside of his grave. Who's going to roll it away? And as they walked towards the tomb, it says they lifted up their eyes, and somehow, you can't explain it, the stone was rolled away. And somehow they look into the tomb, and they look in at the grave, and there's a man wearing white, a young man, and he says, this Jesus you seek, he's not here. He's risen. And you can't explain it. I can't even imagine the emotion of the women, their friend who had died, and now he's not there. People all around tried to explain it. The disciples stole his body. They're putting on a charade, but know that Jesus who is dead is now alive. That's a wild story. You can't explain it. But somehow it's true. Right after the woman hear these words from the young man in the tomb that Jesus is not there, there's about 3 more verses, and then many believe that the Gospel of Mark was meant to end. If you look in your Bible, there's some more verses, and theologians will hem and haw and give headaches all about it, but it's so interesting, the idea of the Gospel of Mark, as it tries to tell us about Jesus and his resurrection. It ends with the woman terrified, astonished, but bewildered, unsure of what happened. It's a cliffhanger ending. It's an unsatisfying ending to this story. And I think it tells you that that is a little bit of how your life goes. You have questions. Your life feels unresolved. There's things in your life you'd like to explain, but there's just no way to explain. You're kind of left in this dark place, unable to see your way out. But you know the rest of the story, and you know that Jesus is risen. And you know that when you think about the last year of your life, in any darkness, in any way that you felt stuck, or any way out, you know what your God has done in your life. You know that when you couldn't see a way out, when everything went sideways, when there was no faith to be found in you, you know that there was a God who was faithful to you, because that Jesus who's faithful to you isn't dead in a grave, he's alive. No, even though your life feels unresolved and unexplainable, somehow your Jesus has come to you. And don't let anyone ever doubt what he's done in your life. After a funeral in the Christian church, we take the body and we go out to a cemetery. You show up to a grave plot. There's grave diggers off to the side, and they're kind of hiding, but they see this happen multiple times a day, and everyone's kind of grieving because someone you love has died. And I'm on record at multiple points telling you that I feel a little bit like a crazy person when I step into a room where death exists. I feel like a crazy person because maybe the family says, hey, Pastor, read the room, and instead what I'm inclined to say is that Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he dies, will live. Somehow. I can't explain it, but I know in every part of me it's true. Because somehow is the Christian's answer to death. Somehow as the body is lowered and the grave is filled in, somehow that body will rise again in Jesus Christ. Somehow this Jesus who was dying on a cross, dead on what we call Good Friday, somehow a Jesus who endures crucifixion is good news for you. Somehow. And somehow just seems to confront what seems so impossible in our lives. This last year, there was a field worker seminarian who hangs out at Christ Memorial and I've gotten close to. And we were gathered together with some other pastors and some seminarians who are training to be pastors. And this man experienced some seizures. He experienced some seizures while we were all gathered in the room. And it was horrifying. It was terrifying for many of us. We had to call EMT. He was placed in the hospital. He was sedated for multiple days. They tried to bring him out of sedation, thinking that he could respond and control himself. And every time they brought him out, he experienced seizures again. And well, the good news is a couple days later, he stopped having these seizures. And Jeff wanted to understand what happened because all of a sudden he was out of the hospital. And Jeff, our pastor, had asked him, what happened? What did the doctor say? And he said, Pastor, it's a miracle. God healed me. Somehow. Somehow allows for a lot of mystery and sometimes even shows us the best work of God. Over at Christ Memorial, there was someone we were working with through our confirmation classes. They kind of start to learn more about the faith and make their faith their own. And a 14-year-old girl coming to worship for the first time, and we wondered if she was there because of peer pressure or if she was there because she felt like it was the thing she was supposed to do because her parents had asked her. And she said, no, none of that. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I believe in Jesus. And actually, just about 3 weeks back, we got to do her baptism, and the emotion was real in the room. The emotion was real because, in my mind, for every time we get bummed out about the church or we complain about decline of some kind, for every time we can complain, there's a 14-year-old that somehow God does an amazing work in their life. And somehow, in baptism, God claims that person for themselves. Somehow, I don't know how it works, but I know that God does it, and his best work is often done in ministry. I have another friend up in Michigan who started going back to worship now that he has a family, because that's the cycle, right? You have kids, and you're like, oh, shoot, this stuff matters, right? And he's going to worship, and he told me that he walks to worship in his neighborhood grudgingly. He said, I can't believe I'm going to church. And he doesn't say this word, but I'll say, somehow. Somehow God has done something in his life that he knows that he is deeply loved by Jesus. In your life, there are unresolved questions. There is darkness that you can't see outside of. Things are unresolved. Things feel impossible. And maybe you cry out to God and you say, God, I don't understand. I don't understand why it has to go this way. Augustine, one of the early church fathers, writes this: why wonder that you do not understand? For if you understand, it's not God. For if you understand it, it's not God. Because God seems to do his best work in mystery. There's much we can teach about the faith. There's much we can hang our hat on and say this is true, and we know this is real, and we know this is who God is, but the best work that God does is when we can't explain it. It's that somehow God so loved the world that he would become one of us. Somehow, a Jesus who would be killed by many would actually ask the Father to forgive them and love them and even love you. Somehow, and we can't explain it, a dead man came back to life. Somehow, there's now a king, the one who died and came alive again, a king over all powers. Every power you see is subservient and under him. Somehow, and somehow you have a creator who deeply knows you. He's not repulsed by you. He's not waiting for you to get better or to fix something or clean something up. Somehow there's a creator who knows you deeply and loves you just as you are right now. And then, as we face death, somehow your faith, your trust in Jesus will be made sight. One day there will be a Jesus who stands before you and says, I make all things new. And that the saddest thing is not the last thing, but actually Jesus repairs and knits together his creation and his world, and I don't even know what that could even look like. But somehow he will do it. And so this is how you end. You say this, and you respond, Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
And we pray. Oh, Father, you are risen, and we can't explain it. We go about our week this week knowing that it's true. And so let this truth of the resurrection sink deep in us. Give us faith to trust it even when we can't understand it. Give us faith to trust it even when we can't explain it to others. But Father, you do your work, create faith in us, send your Spirit, we might know you in your resurrection. In your name we pray, amen.